First two presentations earlier this month, so you guys can check those out anytime you have some availability. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay, and the next one on our team would be Cheryl Parrish. That's coming up on my list.
Good afternoon, everyone. We really appreciate you coming today and joining us in this session. It means a lot to have the collaboration with other entities that work directly with the victims. So thank you for being here today.
Okay. And the next one on my list, I believe, is Christy Ann Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Chris Smith. I am the Northwest Regional Advocate. Just wanted to say thank you for everybody who has taken their lunch break to come sit in and share awareness regarding domestic violence.
All right, and the next one on our team that is in the room today would be Cheryl Moody. Hi, everyone listening, attempting to go on a road trip. We appreciate you being here, Cheryl. And we do have lots of folks that are doing that. I know Emily is in the room, but she had to step away to take care of some other business. She is our victim services manager. And Cheryl Moody is our Eastern Region advocate. And I do believe that that is everybody on our team that is in the room. If I missed somebody, I apologize, but I am going to turn over to our wonderful folks from the Women's Resource Center. We have Patty Hall with us today and Emil Morris. They are a dynamic duo for the Women's Resource Center. They keep everybody in 5 counties very engaged in what kind of services they have to offer, from prevention services to emergency shelter, and the list goes on. And that's why we're here today. We're going to learn about what these folks at the Women's Resource Center of the New River Valley have available for our community. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys. You can go. I have stopped sharing. You can go ahead and share your PowerPoint, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Dee. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. I'm Patty McComas Hall, and I am the Prevention and Education Coordinator with the Women's Resource Center. And my colleague.
Hi, I'm Emil Morris. I'm also with the Women's Resource Center, as you probably intuited. Um, we have been working together now for several years here in outreach and some direct service for both of us in many capacities of the Women's Resource Center, which we'll talk about today.
So I want to just do a disclaimer really quick. I'm actually doing this from a conference that I'm attending, and I'm in a small little space kind of off where the conference is, so I cannot guarantee that it's going to be completely quiet because there's people in the hotel, walking around and stuff, but hopefully it won't be too much of a disruption.
Is this microphone better before we move on? Okay, good. All right. So with that, I guess we should talk about what we do as an agency.
Sure.
So we were the first shelter resource for victims of domestic and sexual violence in Virginia, which is a big deal for us. That was back in 1977. The victim services field looked very different then, but had the spirit is very similar of the movement, and many of the same people still involved in the movement. Even though that our services have grown exponentially, I could almost say, and our area of focus has as well. I mean, those of you that do work in various nonprofits have definitely seen how that changes over time. Originally, when we were founded by a group of women from the community concerned about the issues that were facing their colleagues and themselves, hence our name. But we do provide services to anybody, regardless of gender, identity, or any other demographic factors. We're always striving to be the most inclusive we can be while still acknowledging that gendered power is a form of power, right? It's one that we very, very commonly see and discuss in this field work.
So, and in that vein, we are going to be talking about some of the dynamics of violence and abuse and assault that exist in the work that we do. So please make sure you practice some self-care for yourself. And if you need to step back and take any time you need for you, or whatever, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, it's absolutely easy to sort of, in what we call a trauma informed, right, sort of area of focus and workforce. It's easy to pay lip service, like, oh, take care of yourself, take care of yourself. We really do mean that. When we're out in the community, I always tell people, like, I'm not the bathroom police, I'm not the phone police. Please do what you need to do to take care of your own mental health because that comes first. We're more effective advocates and peers and supporters when we care for ourselves and also when we acknowledge that domestic and sexual violence touch everyone's lives. Like, this is a human rights issue that we all have deep stake in and have been affected by. It's still unfortunately incredibly common. Um, People are reporting more today. Does that mean that there's more domestic violence? Probably not. But it's becoming more and more of a mainstream conversation, similar to mental health. Would you say, Patty?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So, okay, this is our service area. We are located in the New River Valley in Southwest Virginia, and we cover four counties. Montgomery County, which many of you may know of because that's where Virginia Tech is, Giles County, Floyd County, Pulaski County, and the city of Radford, which also includes Radford University. So we have a very wide geographical service area that we provide services to.
Yeah, and each of these localities sort of have a different culture and temperament. I know I saw some folks from Hampton Roads. It's very much like, the Seven Cities situations going on. We are in Appalachian, Virginia, right? The way that we provide services to somebody who has spent, their family spent 200 years in Giles County, their needs and their boundaries may be very different than a student who has come here from Nova, for instance. And that's even assuming that all other factors would be the same. One of the things we always try to do is to focus on the needs of the individual victim survivor when it comes to determining what they want their own safety in recovering. Patty, who's been a counselor here as well as directing the EA program, which we'll talk more about, um, always make sure that the volunteers that we have understand that very, very well, that even if we would make different individual calls, it's so important to let that victim survivor lead the way in their own recovery.
Absolutely. So, again, I want to reiterate that Emil shared this. We serve all victims and survivors of partner and sexual violence in the New River Valley. Despite what our name says, this has been a historic issue that we have been dealing with because we were born, obviously, out of the women's movement back in the 70s, but we serve all victims. That includes men, that includes children, includes no matter how somebody identifies. Um, and the name is a struggle, and we recognize and understand that, but trying to find that balance between the history and the historical knowledge that the New River Valley has over, everybody knows who we are, based on that name versus the need to change a name to make something that looks a little bit more inclusive is an ongoing battle. So we continue to strive towards finding something that's going to work for everybody. It's a work in progress. So all of our services are free. They are confidential and they are trauma informed. We have, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more, a very intensive crisis intervention training, so that no matter who you talk to at the agency understands what it means to provide trauma informed services. And we are primarily grant funded through 17 different grants, foundations, and private donations. And, so we're getting money from a lot of different places. And one of the things that we always accept and want from everybody, obviously, is that we couldn't survive without the donations of our community. So if you go to our website at wrcnrv.org, you can always find a list of the current needs that we have. In terms of how we can, provide more benefits and stuff to the clients that we serve. Our grants fund a lot of salaries and a lot of overall programming. But when we need to stock the shelter with Chef Boyardee and applesauce and, that type of thing, it's the community who steps up, and we're really appreciative of that.
Absolutely. How many of you have heard, I would guess that this is close to 100%, right? You've heard trauma informed before, like that is a phrase or a descriptor, right? I'm seeing hands go up. I'm seeing people sort of like nodding, right? Those of you that are on camera anyway. So when we talk about our services being, I see yes, 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 of course, D. I mean, yes, we know you know. But yeah, when we're talking about being trauma informed, we're really talking about recognizing the prevalence of trauma, the different impacts that trauma has on people, um, and letting that sort of be the baseline rather than assuming everybody's going to want to go with this one, that there's one right way to respond, there's one right way that you should be presenting to services. Everybody's needs, everybody's life is different. We really try to emphasize that, as you see in our inclusivity proclamation there. So our hotline is, do you want to do hotline or volunteering? We'll split it.
So I'll take the volunteering. Go ahead.
All right, so our hotline, um, I'm glad you gave me that one because I made our GIF here. But this is our local number. It's staffed by really staff volunteers that are local. People don't have to go through any robots or anything. Those people are primarily English speaking, but we do work with interpretation services and things like that, and services for deaf and hard of hearing callers as well, as best we can. That's not a perfect solution, right? Because if I'm calling in crisis, the last thing I'm going to want to do is wait for another 5 minutes while they get an interpreter on the line, right? That's not, as we said, sort of trauma informed. But that is a way that our agency, is recognizing and meeting that challenge, like honoring that, hey, yes, we live in Appalachian, Virginia, but we don't just have English speakers, right? We don't just have people that are wanting to engage with this service this way. So making room for culturally specific services, making room for service provision materials that are published in languages other than English, like that is definitely a pressing need. There are always going to be people, no matter what locality you're working in, that speak multiple languages that would prefer to communicate in other languages. So that's something that we're working on too. Um, am I getting any lag? I'm noticing my computer lagging. We do always have. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dee.
You're fine.
Okay. So all of our, I guess, yeah, this sort of forays into volunteering, right? We train people very intensely to answer the hotline. When I go and I talk at Radford University and Virginia Tech, I always emphasize to folks, these skills are transferable, right? Letting somebody like creating a non-judgmental space where somebody is allowed to talk about their experiences, to process those experiences, and to make their own decisions with your assistance where they want it, right? If they're saying, I would love to get a forensic exam, but I'm not going to go into debt for that. Okay, that's something that we on the hotline can do. We can address that, and we'll talk more about that later. But that extensive training really, it doesn't matter where you end up working. It doesn't matter if you end up being a counselor. It doesn't matter if you end up being, a police officer. It doesn't matter if you end up working at a paper company. Like conflict de-escalation, right? Safety planning, those skills are always important.
So we have a very robust volunteer program. At any given time, we have dozens of volunteers who are working with us. They come primarily two ways. We have two major universities, Virginia Tech and Radford University, as well as a community college within our service area. And we get a lot of volunteers and interns that come from the schools who are looking to um, be able to learn more about, what we are doing and get some experience as they get their degrees. And then we also have community volunteers who simply just want to give back. Our volunteers go through a very intense crisis intervention training program that we offer 3 times a year. And when I say intensive, it's well over 50 hours. Before anybody even thinks about letting somebody pick up the phone and answer that hotline. And, or volunteer with our children's program or volunteer as an emergency advocate at the hospital. We're going to make sure that they understand and know what they're doing. If anybody has ever called our hotline, our tagline when we answer the hotline is Women's Resource Center, are you safe? Because our primary focus, and this is what we teach the volunteers as well, is safety is the number one thing. And if somebody says no, then we're immediately going to look at, do they need to hang up and call the police? What do we need to try to get somebody to call the police for them? What do we need to do? How do we get them to a point where they are safe? Can we get them out of where they are at that particular moment? So we do a lot of really intense work with our volunteers, making sure that they have that comfort level to be able to provide those kinds of services. So our another program that we do that we provide 24/7 in addition to the hotline is our emergency advocacy program. This is a 24-hour response to victims of partner and sexual violence where we cooperate and team up with the forensic nurses in our area to meet patients at the hospital. Sometimes we will also work with the police, meeting them at law enforcement agencies, or possibly even the magistrate's offices to help them get a protective order. But this is a team approach that we do. We're really fortunate to have 2 teams of forensic nurses that we work with. One operates out of Carilion hospitals, where we have 2 Carilion hospitals we respond to in Radford and in Giles County. And then we have another group of forensic nurses that works out of the Pulaski Safe Center, which pretty much covers most of, our service area. And when somebody shows up saying that they've experienced some type of physical or sexual violence, then the first thing the forensic nurse does is contact our hotline to find out which one of us is on call, and out we go. It is, and as the advocate, we're letting the forensic nurse is taking care of their medical needs, is collecting evidence, okay, but our role in this situation is to make sure that our person's rights are being taken care of, that the procedure that is happening is what they want to see happen. We make sure that there's no pressure for them to say or do or participate in something that they don't want to. And we're there to support them every step of the way. It's really hard when somebody has experienced a very traumatic event and then they come to the hospital to have evidence collected or discuss this, and now they have to go through these procedures, which can be very re-traumatizing. So we're there to provide that positive support and information. We do a lot of referrals because even though we primarily serve the New River Valley, these hospitals and the Safe Center get people from all over. We get people who come from West Virginia, North Carolina, further southwest that is outside of our service area. We get people from the Roanoke Valley who might come down for different reasons. So part of our job is also helping them get set up with the services that they need in their home area, in addition to be able to getting the follow-up services they need through our area, if that's what's applicable. It is a wonderful program. When we're full staff with that, we have 10 advocates who rotate that 24-hour on-call response. And we hear all the time about how helpful that it is to have somebody, whose total focus in the hospital room is them and what their needs are.
sometimes that pressure comes from even other support people in the room. I might have really wanted my parent to be involved when I'm having this evidence collected, but my parent is processing their own trauma, right? So, like, then
Mhm.
as an advocate, you definitely want to be in that room to sort of make sure that this isn't a deepening of trauma for both parties in the room. The picture that we have here is actually one that I took. This is the exam room at Carillion, closest to Radford, which is actually Christiansburg. And that's what it looks like. You can see that there's a curtain that can be drawn halfway. I mean, we see clients that come from the jails. We see clients that are referred by CPS. We see clients that come in of their own volition. We've seen clients that were dumped off drunk at the doorstep, right? People arrive here in all sorts of different ways. The factors of power and control that they're dealing with are always different. And making what can be a long and invasive exam rather than this horrible experience that people are often fearing, making it just slightly inconvenient is a victory for me. That's the bar that I try to clear, for people to just make it easier and destigmatize that process. Reassure them, help them navigate boundaries like fear of cost and fear of being outed and fear of being disbelieved, and like, how am I going to tell my family? Like, these sorts of questions are often the
Yeah.
questions that people have. How am I going to navigate this with my partner, right? Like, how do I get a protective order, right? These are the questions we're often seeing.
Who's going to pay for this?
Who's going to pay for this? Well, the state of Virginia, usually. For sexual violence, yes.
Absolutely. So we also, which is probably one of the things we're most well known for, is our emergency shelter. We do have a 26-bed, six-bedroom shelter in a confidential location, where we can offer shelter to victims and their families who are experiencing imminent danger from partner sexual violence. I want to state very much there has to be a level of imminent danger. We would love to be able to provide shelter services for people who may identify more as domestic violence homeless, but we are full. I would say probably 90 to 95% of the time, and just simply don't have the capacity. So we have to draw some of those boundaries that we're not really excited about. But if you come into our shelter, all of the services that we provide are voluntary. There's no requirements to you have to participate in this program, you have to do this, you have to do that. But we offer a lot of possibilities and options for when somebody comes in. We offer case management to help develop goals and objectives on how to get out. We offer housing assistance. We offer counseling assistance. We offer, sometimes just something as simple as helping somebody get their birth certificate or their social security card or their green card, if they're an immigrant. That these are some basic services that we provide. We also have a wonderful children's counselor who does a lot of really wonderful youth-based activities and stuff for the children who stay in our shelter. And we try to, our shelter has, like I said, six bedrooms. We don't put multiple families in a room, only one family to a room. If you are a single person, you might have to share a room with another single person, but we're pretty adamant about that. And then we have a nice sized community space with a large living area with lots of sitting down space and a TV and stuff, a large dining area. It's a massive table. And then our kitchen has, like two stoves, two microwaves. It has four refrigerators. And everybody gets, and multiple cabinets, everybody gets assigned their own space so they have some private space to be able to do it. And one of the refrigerators is a community refrigerator where anything that's donated specifically to us for the community, for use, that's open to the community, if it's in that refrigerator and you want to use it, you have the freedom to use it. So we make multiple trips to clothing closets and to grocery stores, and we help people get on benefits if they need to do it to make sure that people have everything that they need. We do have some transportation, um, provide that we can help people get to some medical appointments or to social services, or to court to make sure that people can get the services that they need. One question that we often get for our emergency shelter is there a specified time of stay? The answer to that is no. The length of stay is based upon need and the productiveness of what somebody is doing. So if somebody's not working towards, trying to better their situation, we're going to look at that. But it's not based upon whether or not they access our services, because some people prefer to do it on their own, and that's okay. But there still has to be some forward progress. You can't just stay indefinitely. But we're not going to say to people, sorry, you can only be here 30 days regardless of your situation. We just don't do that. The average stay tends to be somewhere in the vicinity of 2 months, which means some people spend a much shorter amount of time and some people spend much longer. And the shelter does have staff on site 24/7.
And that's very good because despite the amount of stuff that we build out, it is community living, right? And for those of us, if you've ever spent any time in a dorm or at a camp, like you remember what it was like to get thrown in a relatively small area with a bunch of people maybe you don't know very well. Well, if you're a person with a trauma history, this extensive and recent trauma history, as you are if you're coming to our shelter, and you're being put in a small area with a bunch of other people with extensive and recent trauma histories, conflict is inevitable, right? What we try to help residents do is navigate that in a healthy way. I mean, you have people that would never want kids in a million years there with families of seven. You have people with different needs, different boundaries, different faiths, different races, different sexualities, different genders. It's really challenging to create this as a safe space with that multitude of people. But in general, I think we do a very good job of that. I think that we really strive to be fair and thoughtful when it comes to navigating resident conflict. I did want to touch on that because it is so common and so normal, and I think that
Yes.
often agencies don't mention it because it can feel, embarrassing. But we want to set a good tone.
Absolutely. And we have a transitional housing program as well. We have 7 apartments that are available where people can stay for up to 2 years, if that's what they need, and they can stay rent free and kind of help get them into a position when they leave that they can move into their own housing and their own programming and be self-sufficient. And we offer a lot of the same programming through transitional housing. There's individual counseling and support groups for both adults and children. We have a lot of educational workshops that are offered in both the emergency shelter and the transitional housing as well. So that is not staffed, the transitional housing 24/7. That's just Monday through Friday.
And that's also, I know you always say it, but that's also free. So that's a really great
Yes.
point where you have some support. It's not as much direct support from staff as the shelter, but you also have time to, let's say your abuser ruins your credit, right? You have time to sort of get redress from that. Let's say you're struggling to find housing because we do live in a housing fraught area. Like I think everywhere probably has its own struggles with that. You have time to save that up to get your kids in the school system that they want to be in, to address those things that are so stressful to do if you're also constantly worried about money and bills. So we're privileged to be able to do that.
Okay, so we also offer a wide range counseling program. Again, it's all free. We do trauma. I want to be specific, we do not provide therapy. We provide trauma counseling for both adults and children, and that's both residential and non-residential. So it's automatic if you're in the shelter or in Cornerstone, our transitional program that is available to you. But then we also provide it to our residential families that we work with as well. One of the things that we're really proud of is that for the children's counseling, we have the ability to go into the schools. So we have 2 counselors that's primarily where those children's counselors do their work, is they will go to the schools and the children can come out of class for 30 to 40 minutes, get the counseling that they need, go back to class, and that way parents don't have to worry about how to figure out how to get transportation to a location because, as we said, our geographic service area is pretty widespread. And if somebody needs to come to Radford to come to our counseling program from Floyd or Giles, from some of those places, it could be well over an hour just to get to our office. So we do what we can to be able to go to them. We also do online counseling and phone counseling as well for adults. And again, there's no limit on the time frame for what that needs. As long as they're experiencing that trauma, we're going to be able to provide that counseling for them.
Absolutely. And a lot of times people will say, "Oh my gosh, and I'm sure that all of y'all have heard this too, this must be so challenging, how do you deal with it, right? Like, how do your first line responders, right?" And what I like to point out is like, we're really not. We're usually like the second or third resource that somebody reaches out to, often at the behest of a counselor or a pastor or a sister or a friend. Most people, when they're seeking support, seek supports from places they already know and already trust. Some exceptions to that is if they already stayed here, maybe as a child, they're more likely often to reach back out to us because they already have an acquaintance with us. But the people who, are working day-to-day jobs not in this field are often navigating those questions too with far fewer resources than we are able to furnish. So I see us and I think it's beneficial to be seen as support people for those support people, right? Those supportive people in your community, in your family, they're there for you. They will be there for you as long as you're there and they're there, right? We're there to help them and to help you, and hopefully people do have those supportive members. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's people's probation officers, right, that say maybe you should call the Women's Resource Center. And we're always grateful for that too, because often, yeah, they should really call us, right? And we can do a lot in terms of the amount that people are trying to navigate in their day-to-day lives. Just the average person is carrying so much that many of us just don't know about. It's not just in this field, it's throughout this world.
Absolutely. Okay, we also provide court advocacy to anybody both in shelter and non-residential that needs it. Court advocacy is oftentimes help with the civil issues that people are dealing with. We have 2.5 staff that are specifically funded to provide this advocacy. It's a little unbalanced because 1.5 of those staff are through the Victim Witness Program in Pulaski County, and the other full-time staff covers the other 4 localities. So, it's just the way sort of the grant funding has played out. But they primarily provide information and assistance for, getting and extending protective orders, custody issues, visitation, child support, that type of thing to be able to help people advocate and stuff and get what they need to get those types of things. We will do some assistance for filing for criminal warrants and some accompaniment for criminal procedures, but it's really a balance of what's being provided through victim witness for that versus what's more appropriate for us to be able to provide. We also have a very streamlined process to get people hooked up with legal aid so that we can help get them the representation. We're very specific about the fact that we are not attorneys providing the court advocacy, but we will get them hooked up with legal aid as we can. We will also help somebody fill out the paperwork and get the process going to get reimbursed for expenses through the Virginia Victims Fund. We're very excited to be able to provide that service as well. The other big program that we do is our lethality assessment project, which we are currently doing with 2 localities in our area, and we're in the process of starting that process with potentially 3 more of our localities. And the way that that works is when police respond to a domestic violence situation in the community, they see certain things that they're trained to observe. They will do a very short lethality assessment with the client in that moment, and depending upon which way they answer the questions. So some of the questions, if you answer yes to say question number two, it's automatic, or maybe if you get answer four or more of these other questions, um, the police officer will explain their level of danger to them and offer them on-site services right there to call our hotline to set up safety planning and further services right in that moment while they're there at the home experiencing that. So that's really helpful as well. So, and lastly, but by far not leastly, is our community education team, which is what Emil and I are part of. One of the things we're very proud of is our Peace Line education program. This is a program that we have two staff members who are dedicated to providing healthy relationship education in the public school systems. We are in all five localities where we're providing programming from sixth grade through 10th grade every year to teach youth about communication, boundaries, harassment and assault, and dating violence, and what does a healthy relationship look like. So they're often kept very busy doing that. And we've been doing that since 1997. So we've got a long history with the school systems in terms of being able to provide that education. And I know Emil has experienced this, as I have as well, that we've been at the hospital on an EA call, and a young adult will come in and say, "Oh, I know the Women's Resource Center. You all came into our school to teach classes." So they're remembering some of the things that we're teaching them. And we have three very important taglines through that. One is no means no. Two is the victim is never at fault. And three, you have the right to be safe. And that's what we hope to be able to teach. So the second one is community education. Amelia, you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. It always takes different forms. I always tell people will be like, "Oh, Neil, will you come speak at such and such or on such and such?" I'm like, "I'm happy to be wherever you want me. I'm, I'm just thrilled to be here, right?" We'll go anywhere. And just to sort of supplement what Patty's saying too, when I go to like Nova Community College, Radford, Tech, the students who are local students who have had anti-violence education in their schools, right? They are much more comfortable having the more adult level conversations about violence. They've had the practice. And that's so important too, that, if a child is living in a system of domestic violence, right, they're observing all of this harm and they're also observing the silence that often surrounds it, the lack of response from agencies they're being told in other capacities to trust, the lack of involvement from protective parties that they may otherwise be relying on. So it's so important that multiple people step up, multiple parties step up and try and have that conversation with people to kind of unpack that trauma so it's not as internalized, so that child is not like, this is just what life is, there's nothing I can do about it, right? And there have been so many students at all different levels who talk about how happy they are to like have more language to describe violence and describe what trauma is, because when we don't give them that language, they're still suffering, right? They're not any better off from us feeling like we can't discuss violence with these kids, power and control with these kids. Like they see it, they just may not understand it. I'm sure you would say as well, Patty.
Absolutely. We also do a lot of community collaboration with our partners. We have coordinating councils where we do information sharing and try to do some education. We have an active elder justice task force that Emil and I work with to provide services and support to the seniors in the New River Valley. And we will work and support our partner agencies again anywhere as needed and as we can.
Here are some of the numbers that we had over fiscal year last July to last to June. about how many people we served, how many folks spent nights in our shelters, how many EA calls we responded to, and all of these things. Even in just sort of that like winding down of the pandemic, we saw pretty high numbers again for a relatively rural area, and we know, as most of, and we all know, right, that these are underreported, right? That people don't come to official resources broadly, that they are intimidated by all the societal myths that we, internalize, that they, maybe have had negative experience with other forms of service provision in the past, right? We never want to leave those people behind. But even with just the amount of folks presenting to our agencies, these are the numbers that we've got. Anything you want to add on this one, Patty?
No, I'm good. So we just wanted to kind of just spend a minute or two before we close out to talk about what you all can do. The recognition and understanding is that a very small percentage of us, people who are experiencing violence, contact their local domestic or sexual violence program first, before they seek help from other people, as Emil has already talked about. So we just want to kind of share a couple of things about everybody knows somebody who either has experienced violence as a child or as an adult, or could be experiencing that now, or may in the future. So just some things that would be helpful for you guys to know. Know what the signs and symptoms are of violence so that if you see it in your family and friends, you know that you can recognize it for what it is and be that supportive person in their life. Oftentimes, how much help somebody will access is going to depend on the reaction of the first person that they talk to. If they get a negative response from the first person they reach out to, it may be years before they reach out to somebody again. It's important to let them know you're there from them and that it's not their fault. They have the right to be safe. Um, and that you can voice your concerns and list some examples and some places where they can get resources. But it's also very important to know and understand that you cannot force that help on anybody. People are not going to leave until they're ready. The average person doesn't leaves or thinks about leaving 7 to 9 times before they leave for good. And that is because it's really, really hard to leave. And a lot of people don't understand that. The list is very long about why people stay. So if you can help avoid somebody getting isolated, if you can make sure that when somebody is ready, that they still have a network of people that they can reach out to, if you can be that person, that would be really awesome.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with one of the sheriffs, yeah, the patrol directors down in Floyd County, and I was speaking to her and I was saying, for people who maybe have had negative experiences in the past, what is the lowest boundary, what is the most casual way that they can interface with you and sort of overcome that hurdle? And she was like, they can actually come straight to the dispatch office. They can make an appointment with me. If this is a woman who's experienced sexual trauma and she's scared of calling and getting a random man showing up on her doorstep, even if he is an officer, maybe even because he's an officer, right? They don't have to, right? There are ways around these boundaries. Like that's one of the most important things that I think we do as advocates is that we'll be that person to say, okay, I called the office. I looked for this. It seems like this is the person you want to talk to, and I can be there on hold with you. Right? You're not pressuring that person to make a certain decision, do this, this, and this. If it's a question of their own safety, right? There are other issues of like mandated reporting in terms of child abuse and things like that. That's a separate. I can't remember the turn of phrase. I was going to say bottle of worms. That's not correct. That's a separate issue. But we definitely want to restore as much autonomy as we can because if somebody's suffered domestic or sexual violence, they've already had that autonomy taken away. They've already had that violated in a very profound and personal manner. And we don't want to be a part of a system that then is doing that again. The other thing that I often see, especially that I hear from college students, is that they're like, well, I tried to do this, right? I talked to uh, Jean and I told her that her boyfriend Jeff is a terrible person and he's awful for this reason, this reason, this reason. Well, what is Gene's first response to that, right? Gene's first response, as would be most of our first responses, would be to defend our partner, right? So inadvertently, we then have a friend who, because they went this route of criticizing the partner versus saying, hey, when Gene spoke to you like that last night, that would have hurt my feelings. How did you feel? Right? It immediately puts that person on the defensive and can actually convince them to stay long. Like it can talk them into a place of defending the relationship and affirming that sunk cost. So we really want to focus on positive things. What's something you want to do with your life? Does that feel right for you? Again, focusing on empowering victim survivors versus essentially scolding victim survivors, even if our intentions are good.
So we want to make sure we leave some time for questions. So, we want to go ahead and finish up. To answer Diane's question in the chat, yes, we have a list of emotional abuse actions that we can definitely share with you. We can get that to Dee, and she can pass that on.
It would sound kind of um, what's the word, casual to just say, if you notice that you're feeling worse when this person is around than you are better, that's that red flag, because that emotional abuse can take so many different forms. I mean, in like the pickup artist scene, people talk about negging. There's like gaslighting. There's all sorts of different behaviors, some of which are often, misdefined on social media and things like that. Like that's a thing we run into often with clients, is that they'll just be sort of, again, they're looking for language to describe their experiences and put reason to the chaos, right? So letting people talk through, what are the behaviors actually like? How does it make you feel when this is happening? Like that, I find to be helpful. Patty?
Yes, absolutely. We see a lot of, you know, somebody says nothing that they do is ever right. No matter
Hmm.
how hard they try, it's never good enough. People being put down, you're right, the gaslighting, intimidation. Those are all, things we see in relation to emotional abuse.
Hmm.
And
And
the list is long.
the list is very long. I would actually recommend, one of the ones that I often recommend again is the One Love Foundation. They have some really good videos that are good for generating discussion with, like, your family, your kids, your friends, about what that can look like. And they just released a series of short videos about digital violence, like the way that people put one down silently behind closed doors, behind that screen, because it can be so hard to detect compared to somebody yelling at their partner out in public. I find that very useful to start that conversation. How can you? Okay, so Amber wanted to know, how can we better support your organization in the community? Um, Patty, is it okay if I answer this one?
Go for it.
So I would say one of the best things that you can do, no matter where you live, is to make sure that people in your life, and you yourself, of course, are engaged citizens pushing for this in the public sphere. Like, we want education about domestic violence. We want education about sexual violence. We want to make space for this. We want to have a walk in April for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We want to have a fundraiser in October. Like, asking organizations, asking people, creating that space is really important. Like I said, we're happy to come into it. We can put some of that together yourself, but many hands make light work, right? Um, Donations are wonderful. Donations are fabulous. But cultural change takes everybody.
We really want to normalize for everybody that violence is not okay. We still, unfortunately, in this day and age, still hear many people talk about, oh, well, that's just how people are, or, accepting that some form of intimidation or violence and stuff like that is still acceptable in relationships. And
Hmm.
calling people out when you see something happening that's not okay. Finding a safe way to let people know that you don't think this is okay. Um, as a general rule, it's hard for us to speak up when we see things we don't like. So how can you find both direct and indirect ways to say that, no, this is not okay? The more we tolerate the behavior, the more it's going to continue.
Right. There's a classic continuum of violence exercise teaching yourself to recognize power and control where it exists, in all forms where it exists, that's very helpful. Like what are the factors that are going into the system that's keeping this person here? Not just like, why don't they leave, right? Like that's the classic, but like seeing, okay, they are entwined on their lease or their home ownership agreement. The abuser owns the car. Like the abuser is saying you'll never see the kids again, right? Maybe the victim has mental health diagnoses. Like all of these things are part of individual people's relationships that go into why they stay or don't stay. Maybe they're both from a very insular sort of friend group or culture or whatever, where like if you come out, if you seek support from other people, that very insular little group is going to split. Right. So maybe it's not worth it to me. Like I can't find, new friends of this very specific, group that I'm in. Like, so I'm just going to try and make it as unobtrusive as possible. Like we see all these things happen, very high powered workforces. Is it going to damage my career? Right? To be known, quote unquote, as a victim of domestic violence. Like these are all really important factors to consider. So like thinking about it from all these different angles, like do hypothetical case studies, things like that, or hear from victims yourself. It's almost inevitable that there's people that who are willing to help, who are willing to share their story. And of course, a lot of you are with victim services field, and you're already doing that. I think for us in this field too, sometimes we have like an old school psychology mentality of like our trauma doesn't matter, like we need to set that aside when we're doing victim services, and like that's not exactly true, right? What we've experienced definitely impacts our behavior and definitely impacts how we interface with people, and that's important to recognize.
Okay. Any other questions before we wrap this up?
Just a statement that we as advocates need to remember to take care of ourselves too, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we're going to have a hard time taking care of others and
Well
helping
said,
them
Dee.
take care of themselves. And if you guys would stop sharing that screen, I want to bring my little screen back up so that it gets part of the recording. And I do want to say thank you so much to everyone who is here and attending today. Our second to last series in this Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much for all the information that Women's Resource Center was available to provide for us, and the clarity in, the inclusivity that you guys have been building across your agency over the last several years. And I came on board with you guys in about 2017, which was right about the time you rebranded and went to Insight Safety and including everyone and, providing services for men and different things, which is not the tradition, but it is very well needed in the area. And across the board for all agencies. And, as you guys have found, along with several of the others that we've talked to so far this month, you have to keep evolving as your client base is evolving. If you don't talk about technology, stalking, and things like that, then you're doing a disservice to the folks that you're working with on preparing them for safety, etc. Thank you, everyone, so much. Just remember, when you log out of the meeting today, you should get a pop-up about doing a survey about the session. In another week or so, I will send out the link for the YouTube of this presentation, so you'll be able to see all the slides and all of those kinds of things. Thank you so much for all of you coming and for all of you with what all you are doing to support crime victims, domestic violence victims and survivors across your areas, across Virginia and across the country. And with that, it is 12:59. I'm going to give you a minute of your day back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Emil. And the technology was awesome today.
Thanks,
Yay.
Dee. Have a good day, y'all.
Yeah, thanks, Dee.